Hey, everybody. Welcome to Music Biz Live. I'm Portia Sabin, the president of the Music Business Association. It is great to see you all here today with me. Uh, 13 months into the pandemic, we're still on a Zoom call. Yes! Um, I, I'm super happy to be hosting this. We're very lucky today to have such an amazing panel of big time music biz executives to just talk about what we've been through and where we're going. I think if one thing the last 13 months has taught us, it's that you can't kill the music business with a hammer and you can't kill the music business with a pandemic. So it's been a learning experience for sure. So I'm just going to invite everybody to please come on screen and join me. Hopefully everyone who's attending has taken the time to check out everyone's bios. Really, this is a great panel of important people. You should all know these folks. And at the end of this hour, you absolutely will. So feel free to put your name and info in the chat and chat with each other as well as listening to this great panel. So welcome, everybody. Ta-da, there's everybody. I love it. Hi, it's great to see everybody.
Portia.
Hey. I always like to say Carrie looks like she's got a green screen, but it's really just her room. It's like you were prepared for the pandemic beforehand. How did you know that this was going to happen? So let's get started. I want to start with Kiafa. SoundCloud is, a really good example of somehow the internet, the pandemic having silver linings, that like, even though it was a terrible time for most of us and a lot of really bad stuff went down and we're still not totally out of the woods. You guys at SoundCloud are doing some really fascinating stuff. So why don't you just kick it off for us?
All right. Listen, I think that historically we were just not prepared for what was for the tsunami. But for us, because we have already, the genesis of the platform was one that was built on having intimate connections with the community of creators. It really allowed us to be not just super mindful, but nimble to make sure that we activated around our creators and making sure that we provided resources during the time to make sure that we kept them armed with resources and tools and abilities to, really surface the music. We implemented a $15 million fund to really help these artists, via support, direct donation buttons, accelerator programs, and so forth. It was important because for us, what it really prompted is, at some point, we want to make sure that we're equally invested in the careers of our creators. It's super important, right? Especially those in the indie and emerging space. Our hopes is that at some point, we do such a great job that these creators don't have to have part-time jobs, right? That they could definitely have a full-fledged career in the music business. And that's what really, having that is really inspired us to be able to move efficiently enough and quickly enough to make sure that, we had support beams for that community. The other thing that puts us in a unique position is we're so integrated with the community. We have a direct relationship with the community on SoundCloud, and that community spans from artists, creators, singers, songwriters, producers, the whole gambit. And to be able to have those direct conversations really put us in a unique position to really come up with unique initiatives that allowed us, again, to support these artists. We experienced a 50% surge in just the first month of the pandemic, right? We could say, that is, the birth of SoundCloud, as some may say, is, those creators that are sitting in their dorms or their bedrooms creating music. And obviously, when you're on lockdown, we experience such a plethora of creativity. So much indeed that, we decided that we were going to embrace it, and we created projects like, I Am Other in affiliation with Pharrell, where, we just gave artists an opportunity to be part of a project that fundamentally spoke about the artist community, the freshness of the artist community and how SoundCloud is a platform for those artists.
I think one of the things when I'm trying to think back, someone said before that like the pandemic feels like it was 100 years. I feel like things that happened before the pandemic are so far in the past. But I remember like right at the beginning of the pandemic last year, it like nobody knew what to do, right? Like we didn't know what was going to happen. So everyone was sort of like, do we release records? Do we not release records? Like, what are we supposed to do? But Wendy, your company, your artist Dua Lipa, like made the decision early in the pandemic to actually release a record. And then it ended up being the right decision in a big way.
Hey, I would love to say, yeah, we had it all figured out, but hell no. I mean, come on, like none of us knew what was going on.
No.
We just went into lockdown after a year of meticulous planning, with the label, with the artists, with our own teams, with our agents, we had a year's plan that was locked in stone and it was flawless. And obviously we just ripped it all apart and threw it out the window. And even when we went into lockdown, we weren't really clear what the next step was. And fortunately, we have a real visionary artist, a real unicorn artist in Dua Lipa. And it was a really stressful time for her and for all of us. So we were actually going back and forth, we were all on these Zoom calls, which none of us really knew. Like Zoom was still new to us at that point in time, a year ago right now. So right as we were still trying to figure out what to do with the album release, it leaked. The entire album leaked 3 weeks ahead of when it was originally slated to come out. So we felt that we either shelved this album for a couple of months and put some new songs on it, which would have made a lot of people very unhappy, not just the artist, but all her fans. So, Dua ultimately made the decision, like, let's put the album out as soon as possible. So we decided to move up the album release, and everything was every day there was an emergency call. Basically every day we were trying to figure out what to do next and where to pivot to. So we didn't have the master plan, Portia, but I think that we were all very much in tune with what Dua wanted and what her fans expected. So, and everything that we tried to do, everything was new to us. When TV said that, oh yeah, you can just do your own performances and just give it to us. So we had to reimagine what that would look like, because the first couple of ones that we saw, it wasn't very engaging. And I think that, everything we were doing, we were just trying to make sure that it was, I guess, different and refreshing, I guess are the right terms. And that went across the entire campaign. I mean, listen, we thought we were going to be in lockdown for 2 months. A year later, we're still kind of in lockdown. I know some states have obviously had an easier time. But yeah, I feel like every day we're still making these decisions on the fly, but ultimately at the core of every decision is what matters most to the artists and to the fans, and everyone else's opinions, let's shove it to the side.
Yeah, I really feel like one of the silver linings of this pandemic is that fans kind of managed to get to see a much more intimate side of their favorite artists, which maybe wasn't what anyone thought would happen, especially with the places where the industry was terribly hard hit. Obviously live is what I'm talking about. Cheryl, do you want to talk about sort of your industry, your portion of the industry's reaction to sort of the end of live, but then the rise of live streaming and other things?
Yeah, totally. I mean, obviously when the pandemic first hit, I don't think any of us ever could have imagined touring to be gone for this long. I mean, aside from being busy with trying to figure out how to, keep your clients busy in other areas. The amount of times we've rerouted things thinking that it would be back by last fall, and now it's like still questionable to this fall, has been just a whirlwind. But yeah, I mean, and immediately for us, it's, the UTA, thank God that we have such an incredible, branding team and a whole division that focuses solely on live streaming, which we actually had that before we even realized that we needed it. It was instantly overnight. They went from being, people you used sometimes once in a while when you wanted to stream something to the most important people in the whole department, like overnight. But for us, it was, really diving in with our clients and figuring out what are your other passions. I think I learned so much more about them just as people than I ever thought I would, and it started with trying to find creative ways for them to do things that they might have already had planned. I mean, with Post, we had a big hit with him doing his Nirvana cover tribute, which never would have happened if we were in real life, right? He was actually on tour when the last 5 shows got canceled. So just, live streaming in terms of artists putting on their own shows and partnering with platforms, but I think we saw a big rise in it as well. And terms of like having artists perform shows within video games was really big. We had Dominic Fike, play one of the first emerging sets within Fortnite, which he thought was incredibly cool. Or, we did a deal with Offset to executive produce the soundtrack to American Soul and be in the movie. And these are just things that probably may not have ever even been discussed if we weren't in this space. So I think it gave people an opportunity to dabble in areas they may not have while we were, kind of stuck at home and doing things like that. But I think we're all really ready to get back at it. But I don't think that the streaming portion of it is going to go anywhere now that that's around. I think that we're going to find ways to, promoters, artists are going to find ways to integrate that experience. If you have a tour that blows out, now there's, thousands of ways to incorporate fans from all over the world into those experiences. If you want, you can get as creative as you want to. It just depends what the artist is looking to do, So I just think that now people are more comfortable with the streaming because of this, and it's only going to continue to evolve in what we're doing in terms of live.
Another area that, pardon me, was really hard hit, obviously, was retail, physical retail, because, just couldn't go into the stores the way that we normally do. But the other thing that's kind of coming through in what everybody's saying, what I'm really hearing, is creativity, right? Like, what a bunch of creative people we have in this industry. We're so lucky. It's not just the artists. The artists obviously are super creative, but like the people on the business side are really creative too. And Carrie, I know you've got some great stories of just like creative ways that retailers reacted to this crazy pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, think about what a record store is. It's an enclosed space where you go in and touch everything, talk to people, and then walk out. Everything you're not supposed to do during a pandemic is what these small independent businesses do in neighborhoods all across the country. And they were kind of shell-shocked when it started. And, we at Record Store Day, it's a great day, it's a big party, but it's also, we try and year round give them the structure. I really loved the term support beam. That's kind of what we try to be for these stores on the music end, but also on the business end, and try and teach them, yeah, you sell records and that's great. And everybody wants to go in and sell records, but you won't be doing that in 10 years if you aren't smart on the business side. And that's what we focused on. And that's what we encourage them to learn about and change. And, Music Biz helped us bring our conference for record stores online. That speaks to the streaming thing. We created a conference 5 years ago to teach these guys how to be better businesses. And then we couldn't bring them all together to do that. So, but it was possibly the most important time to teach them to be better businesses. And watching them kind of really quickly go from, oh no, what do we do, to, well, we reach our customers in any way we can, and we get them the music they want in any way we can. Like, do we literally go on Instagram, show them a record and say, call dibs in the comments if you want to buy it? Yeah, You do. And then you learn that Instagram, if you say the word dibs over and over again and you buy a lot of records, Instagram will think you're a bot and kick you out. So then you create like, hey, spice up your dibs, say crazy things. I mean, all these things these stores learned. And keep in mind too, a lot of our stores, our older owners are, for lack of a more positive word, crotchety owners who wanted nothing to do with the internet. Websites, don't want to hear about it. Social media, nope, I am a proud brick and mortar store. And that's fantastic, except when people can't come to your store. So watching the younger owners who are already all about, incorporating the web, teach and educate the older ones, and watching the older ones go, my sales weren't that bad this month. And that's because I created a website and I'm still able to reach my customers. And the support that they gave, that the communities gave the stores, was just astounding. And yes, it's true, there weren't live shows for them to spend their money on. And yes, it's true, they were stuck at home and playing new music on a record. Turntable sales skyrocketed. I think people got tired of everything being on a screen and being on a cloud. And I think people would normally get tired of that, but they got tired of it faster because it was constant. And that's the only way they did work. You don't go to work in an office anymore and then you stream shows, you stream work, and then you continue streaming your entertainment. That wasn't necessarily what people were constantly wanting to have in their face. So turntable sales skyrocketed. CD sales did pretty good too. I mean, physical media is a touchstone for a lot of people now that it wasn't necessarily before. It increased for the people that were already there, that were already supporting their indie record stores and showing them, hey, I'm going to send you $20, just pick out some records and send them to me. That was a super common thing that people heard. And that's because you just want to support this independent business that happens to have this. You don't need records to survive, to live, breathe. It's not food, it's not water, it's not any of that. But you kind of did need records to survive, and music and all the creativity that everyone else is talking about in a physical format, purchased from humans in your neighborhood or across the country, because you could start supporting indie record stores. You could still have things delivered to you, and they didn't have to come from a giant warehouse somewhere. They could come from a record store that was going to live stream every Thursday night that they were packing up the records to go out that week. Maybe it was a 20-minute stream, maybe it was an hour stream, because they had that many records to pack up. That was Luna Records in Indianapolis. Every Thursday night, they would just stream what they were packing up. You could hang out in the back room. They write little love notes and stickers and send things in the packages, and making that human connection in any way they can was just, in the year of a pandemic when everyone was really, really scared at the beginning, it's kind of a joy to watch, honestly.
Yeah. And I think that's sort of been the through line of everything that everybody said, is this human connection, right? We've managed to, even though we all have to be apart, we actually have managed to be together, which is so surprising, right? Like on some level, it's really surprising. Justin, I wanted to pull you in here because, the publishing world, of course, has had just a crazy scene the last year. It's been, in terms of putting money into the ecosystem, it's the publishing world might be the sort of epicenter of that right about now.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. It's just so funny even doing these things, because obviously we all love doing events, and actually I think going to the events and being around people is probably the best part about it. So it's so strange just looking at a little green dot and red dot on our computer screen. So if anyone's out there who knows me, I'd love to hear from you, because that's what I found out even this last year. It's like, just pick up the phone and reconnect with people, because it has been such a strange year for all of us, and you just kind of never know, what the person on the other end of the phone or Zoom or whatever it might be going through. So that's been most fun. I've just picked up the phone. Usually most mornings I carve out a couple hours just to pick up the phone and just try to connect with people and see what's going on. But from a publishing space, yeah, no, it's definitely been exciting. It's kind of crazy and wild for me to think about it, because our company's 15 years old this year. And, when I launched Primary Wave with my partner, Larry Mistel, 15 years ago, I was at Epic Records and didn't know much about publishing. And there was just the major publishers, and Larry had an idea that he felt that there was really a value to really work and mine publishing catalogs. That's when we bought the rights from Courtney Love 15 years ago. And honestly, I don't think we knew that 15 years later this would have happened in the industry. And I mean, maybe it was like a perfect storm, so to speak. And I don't really think COVID and the lack of touring really pushed it over the edge. I think it's a lot of money actually in the marketplace. Not only just I'm talking about the music industry, but just the market itself, and Wall Street looking for opportunities to see returns on their money. And music publishing assets throw off very predictable income streams, and they've really seen it as a very viable asset class. And I think that changed a lot of perceptions. And then, of course, yes, you could talk into COVID, and even obviously a lot of talk of the change of capital gains tax maybe going away. And it definitely it turned into a headlines this year that I don't think any of us had ever seen. And it's definitely increased prices. It's definitely kept my phone ringing on a consistent basis. And not everything could trade at multiples of the Dylans or the Stevie Nickses, of the world, or obviously Paul Simons was traded last week. But they are seeing premiums, and I'm excited for obviously a seller if they're going to get a premium dollar and they feel good about it. Our approach at Primary Wave has been a little different. We've always looked to partner with with an estate and really have them along for the ride, so to speak, and really try to increase the value of a said catalog. But the competition's great, and it's really great to see publishing being reviewed. And I think there's so much more to that. It's not only just about buying and selling. It really has to do with, in my opinion, the great discrepancy that's being paid out between on streams. I mean, the difference between a master and a publishing stream, and we could probably do endless, Zooms on that matter. And that it affects a lot of people. And it's interesting because, songwriters, I don't know if everyone been talking about the pact, which has been out in the press, and a lot of the songwriters in LA and their managers have been talking about this, about, not giving up pieces of publishing as it relates to, if the creator wasn't in the room, or, an artist, so to speak. And that's great. And I think it's a great cause. But to me, I also keep looking at just the absolute complete discrepancy of what's going on, when streaming takes place, and how much more a master holder is getting paid than the publishing. So there's a lot of work to be done. I'm excited to be a part of publishing. As you can see, I'll talk for anyone who works with me or I've worked with. And we all do this because we're passionate about music. And that's what to me is exciting. There's so many passionate music fans out there. I know I'm one of them. I like to talk to them on a daily basis, and I don't think there's anything we can't accomplish. I think we have to be doing more of this and coming together and talking and pressing down on and digging into the issues.
Definitely. Neem, I wanted to bring you in. We're talking about money in the industry. I think one of the other things that's really interesting about this time is we started sort of seeing this a little bit before the pandemic, but then obviously I think, the pandemic had an effect on every part of the industry. But I feel like the way that deals are done these days has changed so much from sort of a very standardized way that it used to be done in the old days, sort of like, major label deal, percentage deal, that sort of thing. And I feel like, artists are approaching labels with a different set of tools sometimes these days. I ran a label for 13 years, and I had people say to me, bands don't need a label anymore. And I'm like, okay, fine. They may not need a label, but they sure as hell need the people who are going to do the business that a label does for them, right? Like, you need a team, you need people who are going to do this for you, because it's not, we don't want our artists to run labels. That's a big job. So I just wanted to bring you in on, what you've noticed over the last year and what you think has changed.
I mean, I wouldn't go as far as saying that deals have completely changed. I think we're in a very diverse environment of deals right now. You still see a lot of very traditional major label royalty-based deals being put out there, and they'll put that deal in front of you if you'll take it early on. But I think what we're seeing happen is there are a lot of options now for artists, and there are a lot of different ways to navigate the marketplace. And you don't have to, you don't have the traditional disparity between I'm indie or I'm signed to a major, and there are these ceilings that, existed for a long time. So I think, like you said, you don't want the artist to run their own label, but something that artists need to be aware of is, yes, there is that world out there where you can remain independent, own your stuff, make the lion's share of the revenue, have creative control, all of these things. But that's really only going to work and sustain if you have the right team around you that's going to help you have that longevity in it. You know, obviously this is the music industry, and, you know, I always say you can do everything wrong and win and everything right and lose, because that's just the magic of music, and that can happen. We've had artists who've done everything wrong and not done anything that you tell them to do, and, you know, they've made crazy amounts of money and have had great careers. And, you know, that's just part of what this is. But, you know, generally there are these building blocks that come with running an efficient operation as an artist. And, you know, but I will say the main thing that I have noticed is it's all across the board. You have an artist, he might have a little buzz right now and somebody's going to put a traditional record deal in front of him, but that artist might release 1 or 2 projects on his own, build up leverage, and then he can command a totally different deal from the same company. So, you know, having the attorneys that are fielding deals but also understanding the value of the artist is important. And, you know, between the do-it-yourself distribution platforms like, you know, DistroKid or United Masters and those companies, to the distributors like an Orchard or these companies, to, you know, an Empire, to the major labels, I think we probably have a very diverse environment right now when it comes to making deals, and artists definitely have a lot of options. But they will put that deal in front of you if you'll take it out the gate. So yeah, I wouldn't say that the deals have, it's not that people have taken out those traditional deals that artists would get stuck in.
Well, and I mean, I think options is the right word that you use, definitely. Carolyn, I wanted to bring you in specifically to talk for a second about, I mean, marketing in the age of COVID. You guys had to have been completely gobsmacked when it first started, just like, what do we do?
You know, it's funny listening to everyone, especially with Wendy and Carrie and Cheryl. I totally just relived the whole year. I feel like, you know, I just relived my whole year with like how we had to pivot to how we did business. And then also how our artists had to pivot with how they engaged, and especially in the live space, and how we had to offer product. So it's like, I just totally relived the whole year. But I will say, you know, similar to what Wendy said, we thought it was temporary. I can tell you that we walked out of that office that day, I think it was March 13th to be exact, and we were like, see you in a few weeks, you know, month tops. We had no idea that, you know, here we are more than a year later, and it's like, no, you know, my plants died in my office. I'm sure I have dust collecting on my desk, but we had no idea that it was going to be this long. But I say that to say that we pivoted fairly quickly. And Wendy, if you thought Zoom was tricky, try Microsoft Teams. We had to, you know, migrate the entire company over to Microsoft Teams. And shout out to our IT department, because they were in overtime trying to get everyone to migrate over to Microsoft Teams. But I will say, because we thought it was temporary, we just kind of kept moving. We didn't really stop. We just was like, okay, we're going to do it, you know, on Teams now versus being in the office together. And I will say we pivoted fairly quickly. We didn't really skip much of a beat as far as what we were doing. We kept putting out records. We had meetings that were just like this. We probably over communicated now. We had many more meetings than we probably should have had. And we wanted to make sure our artists and our managers felt like they were being super served. So, you know, we got them on Teams and Zoom calls. So I think all in all, the marketing aspect of it was no different from what everybody mentioned. We just had to get creative in how we were offering our product, more D2C offers. I think we kind of got fatigued a little bit on the IG Live stuff. I mean, how many times can you watch somebody perform in their bedroom? But I think it also forced people to be more creative. And one of the things that I enjoyed the most were TV productions, because they got to be much more creative. You weren't confined to the stage. You were able to create these mini videos and deliver those to the broadcast outlets. And I really enjoyed watching how creative the artists were being with the content that they were delivering. So I would say all in all, from a marketing standpoint, I don't really think we missed a beat. I think we just kept it moving and just, you know, did it in a different way as far as how we were communicating, but we pretty much pivoted fairly quickly.
Awesome. I want everybody to feel like they can just jump in at any time. So this is a general question to everybody. You know, mental health has sort of been a high priority of conversation in the industry for the last 13 months for sure. So, how are you guys doing at your work, at your company, with your own like work-life balance and just, how has your pivot gone to sort of keep your mental health, wellness and everything intact?
I can say on my side, I think there's not a big divide now between work and life, because it's just all, you're all you're in the same space, and it's just, it's just here. So I think that's something that we had to adjust. That was probably the biggest adjustment in trying to figure out this work-life balance, or this, when are you on, or when are you off? When didn't seem to really play out the way you thought it would. And I have an 8-year-old, so you can imagine, who was remote learning. So just my whole life was turned upside down. But I will say that it became something that our HR team was very aware of. And we started to do things to help employees, whether it was meditation sessions or just various panel discussions or open forums about how to manage and how do you shut off when you need to and still feel responsible for the work that you're doing. But that was the biggest challenge beyond what we were doing as a business. It was the work-life balance, and how do you just manage being in the same space, especially when you were in lockdown, severe lockdown, where you were not leaving your house. It was that was quite challenging. I don't think there was a big divide between that.
I think for me, what I realized is, when everyone's going to the office, everyone pretty much has the same work environment. You come, whether you have an office or you're sitting somewhere at a desk, everybody pretty much has a similar environment. But with this, really depending on your home situation, you had a completely different life, right? Like if I live by myself and I have a living room and a bedroom, then I can have a separation. I'm by myself, no one's in my space. If I'm living with 2 people, if I have roommates, if I have a family. So depending on people's circumstances, they had a completely different interaction. Like I would call, our attorney, and you would always have children in and around him. You could hear him, and obviously that's perfectly fine. He's working at home, right? But he's having a different experience than maybe the person who's just by themselves, who can just get up, make their coffee in the morning, and have a quiet start into their day. So I think it created, and we didn't know it was going to last this long. So it's not something that we could prepare for out the gate, right? It started with 1 week, 2 weeks, a month, 2 months. So like this gradually just kept stretching out. I think if in March they had told us you won't be back in office for a year, we probably would have taken different steps, maybe even as a company, as far as accommodating certain things for employees at home and things. We just didn't know it was going to last this long. So after a month or two, it's like, hey, my laptop's broken or my internet's slow at home. And you just have to like implement all these things because you realize this is not going to be over anytime soon. And you have to be respectful of the different environments that people have at home, which you didn't have to really think about.
And to your point, Nima, I think that because we had a peek into our friends and colleagues' lives, it helped us all to be a little bit more understanding and empathetic, because in the past, like if somebody like messed up, like it's so easy to just go like, what the hell are you doing? And typing away like, like a nasty note. And now like, you're like, well, obviously the guy's got his hands full with the kids and everything. Like, I mean, for me, I think personally, like it really held, I felt both lucky and also miserable at the same time, because I don't have to live with anybody. So I had the luxury of my own personal private space. But, that's a good and bad thing in itself, right? Because then I was working all the time because I had really no distractions. And, my coworkers who had kids and all that, no, I can't get on Zoom before 11 a.m. and then I have to start 3 p.m. And then in the meantime, like I felt like, okay, so I'm juggling everyone else who has children or some other responsibilities, because I'm the de facto person who has no kids and no partner, but I have pets. So, but that doesn't count because so I think like everyone basically just had a peek into each other's lives and just, I would hope like
It has
For
a-
for us, it was a bit interesting because we as a company had already started vesting in mental health education because of the nature of our platform, how young our artists were, and we were seeing that we were losing artists, right, from suicide. So we started really taking the time internally, really asking ourselves, like, are we doing are we putting our best foot forward and making sure that the artists that we are supporting are also not just being educated or provided with resources to help their career, but also to help their mental state, right? And so we started early on that. So when COVID kicked in, in addition to, again, providing different support beams and different initiatives, one of our key things was also creating initiatives, programs, a sounding board of sorts, that would allow us to educate the community on mental health issues, resources that they could go for, things that would just help them in a hard time. That was one layer. The artist community. The second layer was obviously our internal teams, right? And making sure that, I will say, I take my hat off to each and every single parent, because juggling work and school and all of that stuff, I take my hat off. I don't know how it's done, but there was a multitude of different layers that needed to be addressed and needed to be mindful of, and that's why, like, from the platform perspective, every year we're really attentive and very mindful of mental health.
For our guys, I mean, this is my forever office. I've always worked out of this pretty green room. It's green for a reason, because that felt energetic. And I had to spend a long time figuring out what everybody else spent this year figuring out, is how do you do the work? When are you on? When are you off? Can you leave the dishes until you finish that email and that sort of thing? So I did try and help some people kind of figure that part out. But for the retailers, for the record stores, I'm starting to think now about how do we help them as we hit back towards normal, because their office is face to face with customers who are humans and who are stressed in different ways and have different political and scientific beliefs and opinions, and will be coming into face to face with record store employees who for the most part are young. You were speaking to how young your artists are and you were concerned about that. A lot of our record store employees are young, and they aren't trained and shouldn't be trained on how to tell someone to wear a mask, or what happens when you tell someone to wear a mask and they really don't want to. That's not a stress you should have when you're trying to introduce somebody to the new Dua Lipa record. That's not it. So, but it's what's happening. It really is. And it's kind of crazy. You can see it on their social media in states like Texas. As soon as it was announced that the mask mandate was going away in a few days, the stores would post up and say, that's fantastic. Get vaccinated and you still have to wear a mask when you come in our store. This is our policy. We are an independent business. This is it. And the level of vitriol in some of the comments, it's online, so chances are they never shopped there in the first place. But if you're getting any of that, as you're going to work, that can get terrifying to me, to think about what they might be up against. So that's something we're kind of looking at now, to try and figure out a way to be a support beam to these stores, because there's so many of them and they're so spread across the country, and it's not really all under one umbrella, but to offer that for whatever they need. It's just kind of a flip side to being isolated. The mental health of not being isolated during a pandemic is pretty real too. And I would imagine artists, as they go back out and start touring, that might be something for them to think about too, because it's a large group and you're still touring and you don't know what the circumstances are going to be about, but you're out there among the people for good and bad.
I mean, I'd love to hear from Cheryl about the touring aspect, because, especially with vaccine passports and all this controversial stuff, going on.
Just about to say, in terms, I think it depends on certain, like, at least what I've noticed, the level of artist you are, the ones who are obviously financially stable, what they've said to me, have loved this time off. You know, I think it's really tough when you're a really big artist to just be on the road all the time. I think until this time, Post had not been on the road in 5 years. But, you know, for some of the developing artists who the touring is their livelihood, it was really tough, you know, like that's where it really fell heavy on us because we're responsible for how they make their money, right? So how can we get really creative and just make sure that they're okay? I think that, you know, of course, everything opening back up is just giving people a whole new light. Like they're just really happy and can't wait to get back at it. Like, I mean, in terms of like me personally, I don't know if anybody else feels like this, but if I was constantly on the road all the time on a plane, you know, once every week or every 2 weeks. So for me, this time, while it's been, you know, a little sad and being away from everybody, like I don't think I'll ever go back to the way I used to work. Like I'm not going to an office 5 days a week anymore. It's, you know, one of the best shape I've ever been in my life, because if I have an hour between 1 and 2, you're not in an office. I can go on my Peloton or something. Like I never used to do that before. It used to just be get up in the morning, go straight to work all day, come home at night, you're tired. Like for me, it's actually improved my mental health, which is a little crazy, but you know, like Wendy, I live by myself. I don't have any kids, so I have, you know, that luxury. But I think it's really like just made me realize that it's so important to take the time to take care of yourself, because it actually makes you better at your job at the end of the day. Like you're better at taking care of other people and doing things the way they need to be done if your own mental health is in the right place. So it's like something that I plan on working to maintain when the world does open back up, because it's made such a difference for me to take that time and make sure that I do things for myself every day that I never did before.
I really hope
a lot of people feel that way too.
Yeah,
I agree. I think I don't think anybody wants to go into the office and sit in a conference room ever again. And I don't know why we should, but I feel like the same way. I feel that efficiency seems to be at an all-time high now. And I hope we can continue to adapt that when the world opens back up. But I really don't see the efficiency in going into the office every day. Think about how much time you lose on a commute alone, you know, and
not
what
having
you
to
could be doing
every day.
You know, yeah, it's like I'm gonna sit in my car for an hour and a half, you know, each way to go to work. Like I can do that. I can get up in the morning and pop up right here, and you know, there's a whole another hour and a half I can devote to working and not sitting in my car. But I think that, you know, what you said about the mental health of it all, and just really finding time for yourself during the day, whereas you probably couldn't do that in the office because you're running around, you're trying to figure out when you're going to eat lunch, and you know when how soon can you order it, and when is it going to come, and is it in between meetings? And I think it's totally different. And you can turn your camera off like right now and eat lunch. Like it's not like you have to always be on camera, but you can be present and kind of in the conversation. So I think a lot of folks are feeling the same way, Cheryl, is like, I don't think I'm going to be in office 5 days a week anymore. And I don't think I have to.
Like how much, I never realized how many distractions there actually were there. Just people can walk into your office and you can get interrupted in so much. You get so much more done just being able to like do it, answer your phone if you choose to, but no one can really like walk in. I mean, of course you like need I also can't wait to go back and like see certain people. I just don't need it to be like every single day.
I think it's healthy to have separation there, because that's what I feel like being in I wouldn't mind just having some separation in that routine so that I'm not at home every day. And the travel part is also tricky because I so enjoyed not having to go to the Grammys this year and sitting on my sofa and watching it and enjoying it, and not having to be running around and working and trying to figure out where's the artist and what are they doing and are we going to get this performance and the production of it all. Just being able to just sit back and say, wow, what a great show that was. I'm really rethinking how I'm working around these big productions. So yeah, I'm sorry, Carrie. You were
No, it's okay. I was just saying, I hope that people industry-wide and really worldwide, let's be honest, take what Cheryl said and then what Wendy said earlier about being more thoughtful about every aspect that happens from the artist to us, to selling it at the end to the consumer, being much more thoughtful about everything that is happening in that timeline and the people who are doing it, who are people. And I feel like this year you got a little glimpse into what was happening, and having the face to face actually did make people more, understanding of, well, they're sitting in front of their fireplace and they're sitting in front. I know that's a corner of somebody's living room. So they're going through this too. And I hope that continues when that's no longer the case, when people are going into offices and they're only doing phone calls, or they're so busy that they can only talk to you via email and it can't be on a Zoom or whatever that is. I hope that continues, like everybody being a little more kind, I guess, when mistakes happen or people are slow or don't miss deadlines. That's not a good thing, but you know what I mean? Like just thinking about the human aspect of everything in this industry. It's a business, but it's people doing it all along the line.
I mean, for that matter, it's like, what's an office space in the midst of this while being mindful of social distancing, right? Like, is it 3 desks apart? Is the same office the same office? Is the same conference room the same conference room, right? Like, especially in pre-corona, where a lot of businesses were changing even the way that a floor was set up, a way that a team was working, right? They were a lot more open concept, less fragmented, less segmented, right? So it's just really interesting to see, for us, it's, we're semi-open, we have it as a voluntary base, but we're very mindful of, there are tactics before you get into the building, once you get into the building, and then how you even sit and engage yourself within that space.
Yeah, I like what Carrie had to say about it, sort of, maybe we can see each other a little more humanly. And I think, I feel like a lot of these types of things that we've done, these lives and other stuff that we've put on as Music Biz, has been like with this idea of sort of bringing everyone in the industry together to understand that we're all in this together. Because I think if the pandemic did nothing else, it taught us that, like, instantly overnight, like we are all in this together. I mean, even if your personal part of the industry isn't connected to the live industry, it affected all artists, right? So it affected all management. Down the line, it affected everybody. So I really feel like that has been kind of a weird silver lining, is that we noticed each other again, like, oh yeah, hi. We're all in this together. We're trying to make this train go. Does anyone have anything that they want to mention that we haven't mentioned yet, like any particular silver linings of this pandemic, or places that we think that we're going to go to now that we didn't know we were going to go to a year ago?
I just say, I don't know if it's a silver lining, but since we're all at least working professionals, I think it was a great burden on our shoulders to really look out for the kids that graduated college last year. And really, if you had a former intern, really try to help these kids get jobs, because it's been a struggle out there for a lot of kids this past year. Listen, it doesn't take much. And these kids are always outreaching to find that 15 minutes. I know I do it. So I just implore everyone to do that on a more consistent basis, because I can't imagine wanting to work in the business and thinking it was all going to happen, and all of a sudden they got hit with this last year. So if we could all just do that and just bring that, something about Zoom, I found this very helpful this year. I remember when I was coming up as a young executive and you'd see the corner door closed and you weren't involved in the meeting. It's very easy to involve people in meetings these days. It's no more. And I find it's been a great way to teach and have the team, really get vested. And I obviously always implore people on my team, like, I want to hear your voice. I'm not asking you there just to be, a face, like, please do speak. And the one thing that I've really noticed more than anything is when you do take meetings, at least someone on our team is always taking notes. So there's follow-up actionable items. I can't tell you how many times I've walked out of an in-person meeting. Like, it always feels, I'm gonna make fun of LA a little more than us hardcore New Yorkers, but it always felt like an LA thing. Like, oh, it was great to see you. And like, you walk out of the meeting and nothing happened. It's like, that to me is just a waste of time. Like, I want actionable items, follow up, put it on that person. And I feel like that has really been a great aspect of Zoom that I never experienced before. That I know I walk out of a meeting, I got to-do lists, unfortunately, sometimes, but that's been very helpful.
I think we should touch upon, in the midst of the pandemic, we also experienced a year where we had a lot of social unrest. And there's been a huge impact on social justice in DE&I. And I do think that that's, it's important to note that that's something that I think coming out of this, obviously we're still dealing with a lot of these issues, but the fact that we can have these conversations and we can put some focus on equality, social justice, social impact. I think that's also been a silver lining in what we've gone through throughout the year. We're approaching the year anniversary of George Floyd's murder, and you have to be able to look back and say what has happened since that, and what programs have been put in place. Have we changed anything on with policy? What bills have been passed? These are things that I think people were able to focus on a lot more, and even in the smaller groupings of how your company deals with DE&I, that's been put in the forefront. And I do think it's important to note that has been happening alongside of the pandemic. So coming out of this, I think is something that we can look at and say, we've learned to have these conversations around that.
Great point. Great point.
Absolutely. And it's something that we can continue to hold everyone's feet to the fire on, because funds have been created, positions have been created. But the thing is, we need to know that a year from now, there's measurable change, right? And that is, certainly on my part, Music Biz is committed to continuing to have these conversations, even when they're hard, because it's critical that changes. As music business executives, the music business is the place for these conversations. Music business was built on the art of Black and brown people. We must do this. We must lead in this area. So yeah, for sure, we got to keep doing that. Thank you for bringing that up, Carolyn.
I also think that with this generation of young people, like Gen Z, if you will, I feel really excited for what's going to come our way in the future, as far as the music business is concerned, because I think that they're growing up, like experiencing the pandemic, to Justin's point, like, it's really going to be hard to find a job, with everything that's going on. And then there's all the social unrest. And yet there is so much passion. And I think that this generation is so articulate and so opinionated in trying to change the world. And I feel pretty hopeful that there will be some change, but it won't come from us here. I think, and that's why we need to empower, young people who are coming up in the world and give them the tools and the advice, and help them experience some positive things out of this crazy year that we've had. So I applaud what Justin said, and really, really look to mentor younger people. And especially since, they didn't have the water cooler chat. We missed out on that part. Yeah, Zoom is great, but you need to have some time away from the camera and just talk shit about things, and that's been missing, I think. So
yeah, that's going to be Music Biz Live After Dark. The part where we talk shit about everybody. I like that. Oh my God. Well, we're pretty much at time here, you guys. I really have enjoyed this so much. Thank you so much to all of you. I appreciate you giving your time to us, but it's really important because I know a lot of the folks who are watching are younger executives. We have a whole series for younger executives starting tomorrow for 3 days, Next Gen Now. And so I know they really have been lucky to hear what you have to say. So thank you guys so much for your contributions, and thanks for doing this.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Bill?
Take care.